mansion. Oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere. But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires, why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. For never can you buy it, grasp and you deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains, God's sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.
In Affirmations for Self-Healing, Swami Kriyananda writes the following on the quality of self-expansion. Self-expansion, he says, is the essence of all aspiration. Why do we seek to possess things? Because by acquisition, we'll imagine we'll expand our dominion. Why do we seek to learn more? Because we think by enlarging our knowledge to expand our understanding. And why do we seek ever new experiences? Because we believe that through them, we'll expand our awareness. When you stretch a lump of dough outward, it becomes not only broader, but thinner. Such often is the case when we stretch the mind only outwardly. Reaching out too far, we sacrifice depth in our lives. The self-expansion toward which all life aspires is of the spirit, an expansion of sympathy, of love, of the awareness that comes from sensing God's presence everywhere. Now, if you're seeking freedom here, which is Swami Kriyananda's sixth song, is one that he wrote, I think back in 1964, which he wrote to point out that true freedom that people are seeking is inward and not outward. And to seek freedom, really, the song expresses this in a very playful and energetic way. It tells about the main delusions that people fall into when they're trying to seek freedom, which is like a release from pain and sufferings and whatever other troubles they're facing, trying to find it outwardly in their lives. So they may think that we need to have some kind of revolution or political uprising, thinking that if we just could usher in some new kind of social era in which people are suddenly transformed, then everything would be okay and we'd have freedom that way. Others seek acquisition in wealth and indulgence in sensual pleasures, while some look instead to the accumulations of power. And really, if you look around in the world today, you will see examples of all of these things and other similar expressions of somehow seeking that release from what we endure in our lives to finding some kind of freedom, some kind of higher existence. But what the song points out, again very playfully, is that the answers don't lie in these kinds of solutions or their endless variations, but it rather begins in the heart by casting away desires and then lifting that heart's energy upward in self-expansion. As it says, once your heart is free, the song promises that once your heart energy is free to flow upwards into self-expansion, you'll be king everywhere. And then you have no need or desire to exert power over other people, especially as represented by guns, which is the revolution and the violence, by gold or money, the wealth, and by moral or political authority of some kind. Now, the direct the tone of this song, If You're Seeking Freedom, is actually very much, it's very personal, and it's actually something like an interrogation. It's not a conversation, it's really an interrogation. The higher self here at the spiritual eye is in a way interrogating the ego at the medulla oblongata. And it's seeing the ego's temptation to seek freedom, or the power that might buy you that freedom, in these different ways. This higher self or higher consciousness says, well, why don't we examine the real merits of each of these? And in this way, really, that higher self talking to the medulla is walking up the spine, looking at each of the chakras, touching each one with the perspective of the spiritual eye to release the energy that gets stuck there in these different delusions, including energy that gets stuck at the medulla. And we'll go into those details shortly. One thing I wanted to do first, though, is looking at the distinct pattern of guitar picking. Let me get my guitar here. I can't quite do the full version that you hear other guitarists do, but it's very interesting that instead of just kind of using, a simple strum or some kind of chord arpeggiations, If You're Seeking Freedom has this very rapid pattern that includes what's called hammering. And let me try to show that. So you hear this, if you can hear that, there's this hammering where you pluck a string and then you hammer it with the finger. So you get this, let me do it right. There, like that. And so you get a few more notes squeezed into the pattern that you can't just do picking with your picking hand. So you do this little hammering business with the left. And that rapid picking is really an important part of this interrogation. It's like a skillful lawyer in a courtroom when you're asking questions of a witness. The higher self here is asking these questions, and it's doing it at such a pace that you, or the ego in this case, doesn't have very long to dwell on how it might answer those challenges. You don't get to linger for very long at any given chakra, nor do you have time to make kind of these, well, yes, but excuses and trying to make justifications. So the ego, with this rapid fire interrogation of just this, what has that rapid picking is this rapid fire thing where the best the ego can really do is go, but, and it doesn't have a chance to answer, it doesn't have a chance to try to discuss the matters with the higher self. The higher self is just getting its point across. And you can also see that this rapid picking pattern is a way of, in fact, also kind of like tickling the whole spine and maybe loosening karma, and also adding a sparkle of energy to awaken each of the chakras into its inherent, each one of its inherent, the inherent divinity of each one. And then in the second part of each verse, the part that essentially explains, why you won't find it there, the guitar, if you might have heard that, includes some very kind of distinct, powerful low notes. There's sort of a, you kind of get that, you hear this kind of, Swami's really hitting the low notes very distinctly there. And it's almost, what I feel from that is like at each of the chakras, whatever chakra you're on, that pattern kind of, thrubs the chakra some, kind of like, it's kind of beating it up a little bit to, again, loosen the energy that's trapped there, to help release it. And again, it happens quick enough that it achieves the goal in each of these chakras before that center has any time to sort of tighten up and resist. And I do think it's an important factor when performing the song that it's done at a fairly quick tempo to allow that interrogation to happen. If it's done more slowly, you'll find that your mind and the chakras really have some time to get their answer together. And I've also heard it done where, like, a soloist will sing the first part of the verse and then a whole choir will come in on the second. And it's interesting to hear that in the context of an interrogation, that when you have that question and then sort of this very forceful response with a full choir, it's almost too much. It's almost like you're really getting throttled by, almost attacked in a way, and that might again have those chakras sort of tighten up and resist too much. So I like this recording that we have from Swami Kriyananda in Say Yes to Life, because it gives the real spirit and the tempo of the song and that sense of an interrogation. And then right at the end of the song, you might have also noticed, let me try to play it again here. That's a little farther back.
King everywhere.
We'll hear it here. It's that little run-up right at the end there that we've been interrogating the medulla and all the chakras in the spine, bringing the energy up by one, and then that last little run-up on the guitar just brings the energy up here to complete the process at the spiritual eye. Now in each verse we can see a fairly clear alignment with individual chakras. So at the beginning we have, if you're seeking freedom in a revolution, which, revolution, especially those including violence, is really a behavior of the first chakra. Revolutions are usually done in a sense of wanting to get rid of something, usually without actually knowing what you want in its place. You're just so sick and tired of something, you want to, dash it away and get rid of it and overthrow the government or whatever. But without something to replace it, without knowing what you truly want, the result is, as the song says, for once the guns stop blazing, whether they be guns with bullets or guns of rhetoric and propaganda and all the different forms of manipulation that we find in media and social media, it says you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on, and that's we do that in performances, how the world can drag on, just really get that scooping there, how the world can drag on just as before, that nothing like the French say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more that things change, the more that they remain as they always were. So, we see this in every election cycle, really. Candidates that proclaim the need for some kind of revolution, and we need to do this or that, and then, but once elected, you find that very, very little changes. If you want to go deeper into this thought, by the way, I want to mention, I just reread the book, Swami Kriyananda's book, Hope for a Better World, and he really talks about how you get people to change, how communities happen, how, what's the essence of that kind of social change and social evolution rather than revolution. And it's a very enlightening book. If you haven't read it in a while, I do recommend in this context to go back and look at it. So then the second verse, so we have that first chakra verse, we've interrogated that, we've released this delusion that you think things are going to change and they probably won't. So we go to the second chakra, if you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, which is really a symbol of wealth and, you might say, sensual pleasures and sensual indulgences of all kinds, suggesting that idea that people try to buy their way to happiness. And yet countless examples show that this doesn't work, that wealth pursued for its own sake does not bring happiness, nor does it bring freedom in any kind. In fact, more often than not, it becomes just as enslaving as poverty. As the song says, for even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money. Meaning that there are bright, joyful, and simple life experiences waiting for you all the time, but you're counting money instead, which says you're obsessed with getting more money, getting more wealth, having more pleasures, or trying to protect what you have. And so the result is keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And it's another thing we tend to, we exaggerate in performances sometimes, that kind of sad look. And that's really the trap of wealth, that once you have it and you fear to lose it, you dedicate so much of your life energy to its protection rather than its enjoyment. And it's that commitment of life energy that then prevents you from being free. So now we've done the second chakra, let's move to the third. We have, if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power. And you might say that the third chakra, being the fire element, as the center of power in the body, is, in fact, a kind of a throne of power, and you're seeking to exert its qualities over others. And again, we see many, many examples of people who are just obsessed, not so much with wealth, but with power and influence, and yet they are, perhaps even more so than the wealthy, dramatically unhappy. The example, Swami Kriyananda would use this one, and I think he might have been thinking of Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union during World War II and thereafter, as maybe the primary example in this context, that even though he was perhaps the most powerful person in the world during much of his lifetime, he slept in a different room every night for fear that, somebody close to him might try to assassinate him. And you might also think of somebody like Julius Caesar, when Swami wrote these lyrics, for though men all obey you, what if they betray you? And you get that, sometimes in performances we use the kind of backstabbing, et tu brute kind of action to just symbolize that what if they betray you and stab you in the back? Whether, literally or figuratively, right? There's a lot of backstabbing going on in politics when somebody betrays you and then you, as they say, throw them under the bus. And so, tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere is the result of that. And how can you be free when you're constantly tense with fear from everyone and everything around you? So then we get to the fourth verse, which is now up in the heart chakra. And it says, if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires. It's starting to provide the solution now. And where are desires centered? But in the heart chakra primarily. So here we've brought the awareness of these different delusions up from the lower three chakras into the heart chakra now. But saying now that, excuse me, that the outward directed energies of the heart, which is the belief that fulfillment can come from mere things outside of yourself, that's really what binds us to those things, to the throne of power, to wealth, to somehow manipulating the world through a revolution or something like that. And then the song says some interesting words that I've had to ponder for some time. It says, why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. Now, bartering means to trade one thing for another. And so to barter like a beggar means that you've got very little to give in return for what you're asking. You're trying to get something for free, which implies then a very high degree of selfishness. And again, many, many people live this way, trying to give as little as possible while expecting as much as possible in return without really doing any work or really deserving it in some capacity. We can also say that the consciousness of scarcity, too, is what deludes us into thinking that we have to get ours, even at the cost of, we have to get ours at great cost to others. But the song here is gently reminding us that abundance is the natural state of things in the universe. You've wealth everywhere. But to experience abundance, you have to let go of that selfishness and live in a dynamic and free relationship with the abundance. For never can you buy it. Right? It's abundant. You can't buy free abundance. Grasp and you deny it. So never can you buy it and keep it for yourself, and then grasp and you deny it, meaning that you can't hold on to freedom, you can't hold on to that abundance as if it were a rock or some other kind of tangible form. You have to be in a dynamic relationship with it. He says freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air, affirming the idea of not only abundance, but of God's infinite abundance. And again, needing to have that dynamic relationship with it rather than a static one. And then finally we have, let me set the guitar down here. Finally, we have the fifth verse, which I think is just full of wonderful symbolism. That we have, if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains. Which says you're not seeking freedom in rejection or acquisition, but, as we started this session, in self-expansion, which is again the essence of all aspiration. For as you expand your sense of identity more and more, you become one with everything. And so when there's nothing outside of yourself, what's there left to grasp? Who is there left to try to exert power over? And indeed, this verse is bringing the energy now from the heart. We've brought it up from the lower chakras to the heart, now to the throat chakra, which is the center of expansion. And then up into the higher chakras, which is clear from these words. God's sunlight, which must mean something like the spiritual eye, right? This is the light of God that you see in the body. God's sunlight on your shoulders. This is the level of the throat chakra. That sunlight coming through the brain, coming through the mind. The wind in your hair, again talking about really referring to the brain and having energy in the brain, but also suggests the sound of the wind in the trees, which is the sound of the throat chakra. And so we're doing all this stuff. God's sunlight on the shoulders, the wind in your hair. Bring that energy up to here. For there's no one can hold you, boss about, or mold you. Because in self-expansion, you are everyone already. There's no one there who can hold you or boss about you. You are one with everything. And inwardly, no one can prevent no one can prevent the energy from rising in your spine except yourself. No matter what your outward circumstances, you can always choose in those circumstances what consciousness you're going to hold. To be happy in yourself, to be with God, or to let yourself sink and be depressed. But you always have that choice to lift your energy in the spine. It reminds me of Nayaswami Devarshi, who's in India right now. He lived at Ananda village for a long time. And he's taught a lot of meditation classes and other subjects in India. And the Indians are very, they often do ask some very penetrating questions. But he said one man one day asked him a question like, well, you've meditated all these years. What powers have you developed? Because if you read a lot of the Vedic scriptures, you see things about acquiring various powers through meditation practices and so forth. And he just very calmly looked at him and said, I have the power to choose to be happy whenever I want. And that's really what we're saying here, that you have that power. There is no one can hold you, boss about, or mold you. You have that choice to be happy whenever. And so the song concludes, once your heart is free, again, once your heart is free to flow up the spine, up from the lower chakras, up past the medulla that you've now released to the spiritual eye, you'll be king everywhere because you are one with the King of the universe. And so we have this wonderful lifting of energy in the spine up toward the higher chakras and the spiritual eye. So how does this song work as an antidote for other emotions? Well, what I like to do with these is I take that upward motion of the song and I say, if I reverse that and I go back down and kind of reverse the qualities and do that self-absorption and contraction into the ego, what am I left with? And try to feel that. So if you think about it, if you reverse this energy, what are you left with is only an ego defending its ideas with those heaviness and excuses I mentioned before. Like, I must fight, I must control, I must accumulate, I must desire more, I must own everything. That's the trap. And then the ego thinks, if I do that, then I will finally be free, not realizing that it is a trap. And that is the quality of desire for power, which can be expressed again through physical strength, through wealth, through political power, and even through various forms of cheating that people do, like cheating on taxes or cheating in school. Or we've just seen stories in the news lately about parents working with, paying bribes to college officials to get their kids accepted and so forth. And it's just like this kind of desire for power and this sort of cheating happens all over the place. So there's that desire for power, but if you try to get the power, which you think will buy you freedom, and you can't obtain it, because power is actually very hard to come by when you're looking at it from that scarcity consciousness or from that power, wanting that power over people. If you try but can't obtain that power, what you're left with there is envy and jealousy. And because you're jealous and envious of other people having power that you don't, right? So if you're seeking freedom, as a song then helps alleviate all these emotions, desire for power and envy and jealousy. And then in a more general way, the song addresses the opposites of self-expansion, which is again contraction into the ego, which you could also say is self-absorption, along with a narrowness of sympathy. And again, I'll mention the book Hope for a Better World here. Chapter 6 is one about the subject of wealth. Talks about Adam Smith and his theories, and has a lot of discussion about that. And one line that's really pertinent in here that Ananda writes, he says, what is wealth really? A person has it in proportion to what he possesses that he himself values. He is not wealthy in proportion merely to other people's envy of him, except perhaps to the extent that he values that envy in the shallow importance he imagines it gives him. The desire for power, too, we can say is rooted in the idea that you can somehow change the world around you if you and find that freedom if only you can get enough power. But the problem is that the world is a very stubborn beast. There's billions of people all over the world trying to get that power and trying to manipulate it to their own advantage as well. And so the world doesn't move very much. And the typical response to that stubbornness is again that thought, I must need more power. I must need more power to manipulate this world in a way. But, no matter how hard it is, but that power again is very hard to come by. And it's quite easy to see again that the pursuit of power is not a path to freedom or path to happiness. It's really a path to enslavement that even those who have it really don't enjoy it. So invariably, whether you acquire power or not, the end result of that, if you acquire power and can't change the world, or you can't acquire power, you're left with resentment. Because the world just doesn't give you the happiness you seek. You have to find it in yourself. And indeed, Swami Kriyananda provides more insight on that thought when he assigned this song, If You're Seeking Freedom, to day 27 of Secrets of Emotional Healing. He writes, "The secret of overcoming resentment is to affirm I am free in myself, and to wish the same freedom for all. Radiate kindness outward from your heart. Be a source of happiness to others if you too would know happiness." Freedom can't be hoarded, so you can give it to all, and there's no one can hold you or force you to feel bound or trapped. It's entirely within yourself. So release that hold on yourself, and release especially those desires of the heart, for once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.
If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere. But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires, why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. For never can you buy it, grasp and you deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains, got sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.